I forgot to press recording.
That's okay.
I'm so sorry.
It looks like it's been recording.
I just pressed it.
Oh, okay.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Another.
Welcome to the Harbor Committee. That's not to worry. We haven't really talked about anything.
We might, you may have to say
redo the
the
roll.
call to order are, do we have to actually have everybody say, or do you want it just?
No,
Yeah.
no, this is not official record. Your minutes are
I'm in.
official
Okay.
record.
Okay.
So I'm good with that. Yep. But this is just a nice to have.
Okay.
The minutes people are going to read. You got us all? We're good.
I got you. Yeah.
So on the minutes, I entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
Move to accept the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there, is there a discussion, changes, clarifications on the minutes? I'm not really doing it justice by scrolling it through. It's 2 pages. Susan was nice enough to write them down and listen to the transcript to capture cool stuff. Thank you, Susan. Hearing no further comments, all in favor of accepting the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? Minutes are unanimously accepted. Thank you.
Hello.
No, I,
Good.
Hey, welcome. Hi.
no, I don't, yeah, want me to sit at the front table?
All right, it's up to you, Mike, come on.
This is comfortable.
All right.
Listen.
You can exit earlier.
All right.
Yeah, right.
Welcome.
Mike Lane, right?
Lane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice to have you. Anyway, so let me just again look at the, I think our next topic is Harbor Master Report. Lori, you have the floor.
Oh, thanks.
Somebody else coming? This is the Harbor Committee if you're looking for us.
I think he's looking for Red.
Rick has a bunch of people coming to it.
An extra.
And Mike, we did just say that we were looking forward to having voices of fishermen heard. Just be free, and at least by us putting your concerns on the agenda if you can't actually get here, so.
Lori,
We're trying to get the harbor prepared for whatever this weekend's weather's gonna be, whether it's gonna be tropical storm winds or less. A lot of people are pulling their boats out. We're recommending that if you can, that you do haul the boat out, whether it be a 11-foot Boston whaler or a 22-foot center console, to get them out of the water. And if not, make sure you properly tie down your boat that's on a mooring to make sure it doesn't blow away. There are on the Harbor Master page of the town website, there's a memo of things to do for hurricane preparedness. To give boaters an idea of what they can, of things that they should do. Basically, first thing, don't stay on the boat.
I shouldn't laugh. Sure plenty of people pulled that.
Yeah, and if the boat breaks loose, we're not gonna rush out to try and save your life. We're just gonna let the boat come ashore and then go from there. So we recommend, people that have outboard engines, put the engines down. If they have any canvas, take in the canvas. They can remove sails or at least tie them down securely so that they don't get caught by the wind. And then if you've got a small boat, if you can get it out. I mean, now we're fortunate, we have a 24-hour boat ramp, so you can get it out no matter what the tide
Absolutely.
is, especially the smaller boats. And people are taking boats out.
I took mine out yesterday
Very
at
good.
30 minutes before low tide,
Okay.
and it was a piece of cake
Good.
and better than the previous ramp because of the angle.
Yes, the angle is better. Yep.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
nice.
they changed that. So that's about all I have to say. We had a good year, no problems. I think it's gonna be a short season. I think those people that are taking their boats out probably won't put them back in. Especially with another storm forming off of the African coast. which was, they say is gonna follow the same track as Hurricane Lee. So we might be doing this all again in 2 weeks.
I know Sean is on the phone, by the way, has been sending out notes to all the sailing club to bail your boat.
Yeah, we've had a lot of rain the last few days, and people are not bailing the boats out. Been raining almost every day. So that's about it. That's all I have.
Okay?
Thank
Other questions or comments for Lori? Thank you, Lori.
Okay.
The next topic is Harbor Committee priorities. This is sort of the meat of today's discussion. Montana, I'm glad you are recording us. But let me, again, try to share. Here we go. So this was on page 2 of the agenda that was distributed. I put this together to react to. My objective today is to listen and facilitate. I will start by walking through stuff, but I'll just share a little bit of the thinking of what is in this list, and also sort of how what the concept of the proposed Harbor Committee role is. So looking at the list, Captain's Walk is something that the CHIP, and really it's Mike Sardina and Tim Davis and I and a few others, have been spending a lot of time with. Mike's doing some amazing design work on that, design thinking. I put this in and threw a pretty broad net in terms of what the proposal can be. There's potentially a number of, we have somebody in the waiting room, so you see that, right?
Yeah.
You're good. So around, this is a place to capture climate resilience topics that have been come up, and there's town grants for that. Sidewalks, parking, roadways, historical signage, recreation, public docks. I actually want to amend that to be clear, that's public docks and dinghy piers. That was the intent of putting that in there. Zoning, commercial development. So it's a wide concept. The idea of this priority and any priority is they're standing priorities. It doesn't mean we can't address other issues as they're brought up at other meetings. But in terms of standing issues, I would like to have some that are here. And it's really based on our manpower to work on them. These are ones that we choose. The select board may, certainly in their interest, request us to look at stuff that should be in our purview. And we will, always work with them on that. This does get to the effectiveness, but really our objective as a harbor committee is to,
You're going down this hall, up the stairs. It's okay.
that's right, keep telling them, is to advise and provide recommendations to the select board and town meeting. So anything we choose here are things that I would say we believe are either good ideas that we'd like to pursue, or they're ideas, concepts around the harbor that are important for us to pursue. And our ability and time frame to pursue them is based on how we organize, how often we meet, and how we do the work. To that end, I've talked with some other committees, and doing the work on this committee, we have subcommittees, but basically open meeting rules apply. So as long as we agree to meet in some town facility, and if we can throw on Zoom, great. If we can't, that's okay too. We just need to, establish a quorum, either of governance. We have the CHIP working group that doesn't take much of a quorum to meet. And we also have Harbor Committee. But that's the idea behind, this list is antiseptic until you think, would I be willing to work on one of these things? And if you're, and I think there's a lot of opportunities for folks represented on this committee to get involved in some way. But for the most part, I leave that up to you. So you sort of self-select in on things you're interested in. So there's Captain's Walk, and the proposed Harbor Committee role is that we're responsible. It is sort of I guess we drew up the term working with Jackie Dormitzer and the Historical Commission. We broadened it a bit, so it's not just the historical signage, it's really looking at all the commercial development that's happening around the harbor and seeing opportunities. And I think what we see over the past couple of years has been some challenges, but it's trying to get in front of future opportunities, get in front of climate resilience, get in front of the development of a new little hotel, get in front of stuff. We've been behind the 8 ball in some of this, and we may still be, but that'll always be the case. Our opportunities to try and get in front of things and give perhaps the select board some advice. I spent too long on that. The other priorities, because I want to hear from others. I put Government Island Pier on there. Lori, I'll sort of let you speak to that. But in general, a key objective of Harbor Committee is to provide support for, let's say, commercial activity in the harbor. I list fishing fleet. Aquaculture is part of what we think about as well. It's, to continue to provide, to support at a very high priority, commercial activity in the harbor. And a lot of these things Lori sort of has with her too, but to the degree we can affect public opinion, we would. I put that in there as consulted. So there's like responsibles, we're running it. Consulted is we want to be involved, but maybe somebody else is running it. Informed is maybe somebody's really running it and making it happen. We just want to stay in touch on it. Okay, so those are sort of the levels. The commercial fishing fleet, again, dredging year, multi-year plan. Lori, I think has typically been the one running that, but we certainly want to make sure it stays high on the radar because of its importance.
And that we can do anything we can to support anything that you need.
Yeah. I put in, these are some others that are just sort of out there for discussion. Shellfish bylaw, had a discussion with Lisa about this earlier, like where does it stand, Okay.
Kind of vague where it is, because there was a shellfish working committee, and we passed one at least through the harbor committee. We put forward a recommendation, and I don't think it ever went anywhere since it.
Wait, there was a shellfish working committee?
Part of the there was, maybe I gave it too much of a glean. I think, we discussed it in the harbor committee. We had proposals, we voted on something. But then I believe that it was brought to our attention either by town council or by somebody else that there already was a pre-existing shellfish bylaw. So that is something that I'll be happy to look into to see where we are.
You mean a constable or do you mean a bylaw?
Bylaw. Shellfish bylaw implementation.
From what vintage are we talking?
Like last year.
Like last year, we worked on one, and the harbor committee voted on one, and it was supposed to go forward to the next step, which would have been the selectmen and then the town meeting.
It's the bylaw that gives the constable, or it's
yeah.
part of the basis for the rules.
Yeah.
Let's, so we're covering some of that.
Yep.
I put bassing speech aquaculture. Obviously, everybody's aware that the select board is very involved with, let's just say discussion with, or contention, however it may be, with Situate around the NAV bylaw. So we're not proposing to put ourselves in
position,
that
right.
one, but there's still, aquaculture is a real thing, and it's something that's in the harbor plan as a potential discussion. Butler Estate, I put out there, wouldn't it be cool to own that? But that's also something we're not doing. But I was just driving by it yesterday thinking, what a sweet property.
Wouldn't it be
That would be.
Well, I mean, I think it's
Town to own.
legitimate to keep that on the list because that's a lot of the waterfront edge of the harbor. And
Huge.
not only does it have a lot of mileage or,
Yeah.
footage, but it also influences, like how they landscape that place also influences the quality of the water. So if, for example, the Oaks decides to use a lot of nitrates and phosphates, we're going to see that in the data. And I know that some of the lobstermen have already been concerned about whether those, if there's pesticides, which is separate from nitrates and phosphates, if there's pesticides that attack insects, then that's the same, those are the same chemicals that may attack lobsters, and the lobster car is right off.
Okay.
So.
Well, so I raise it that, again, I put us down as informed, is it a topic? There's a private group.
Right.
That's pursuing this. Is it a topic we want to get involved in? That's the discussion today. My proposal is maybe, and informed, not running it. And then other stuff.
In other stuff, I don't know what the status is of something that I just heard about. The town of Cohasset is suing the DMF?
Yes, the town of Cohasset has
Well,
filed litigation against.
That's what's on the
Yeah.
select board. That's the select board issue with the NAV bylaw that
So can we get an update on that?
I can give, let's
Yeah, let's get through this.
let's come to that in a minute. Yeah, let's come to that. But don't let me forget it. All right, that was the starting list. So the thought is, again, looking at this list, this is stuff to work on. There's a proposed role, stuff where I put responsible is I did talk with Mike. Mike and I would like to hold a meeting to continue to make some progress on Captain's Walk. That's right, Mike? Sure. You agree. So that's something that's going to come out. So, we're willing to work on that.
Under the category G other, I know
Yeah.
I've discussed and on the governance subcommittee, we actually, for those of you maybe I'm familiar with that, we have the harbor committee and then the master plan came out. And then the harbor committee put together, kind of broke into two groups. One was CHIP, one was governance. And at that time, the town actually promulgated charges under those two groups, but they're pretty broad. And the governance subcommittee did some work recently to give a recommendation about, what should we do with the harbor committee? And the governance subcommittee and now the full harbor committee voted on keeping it in its present, under the present bylaw. But as part of those conversations, I chatted with Lori and with others, and one of the things that Lori suggested was that maybe the governance subcommittee, which then ultimately brings everything to the full committee, start looking at just the bylaws and the rules and regulations, that she has to monitor.
This specifically, those are the harbor bylaws.
Correct,
It's a section of
correct,
bylaws.
correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So that would be, I know that's kind of an A, but,
And what
to
is,
just carve
if you
it
could
out.
tell me, other than reviewing them, what is the possible outcome or objective that you're
I would
shooting
imagine
for in
updating
that
them.
review?
To reflect maybe, more up-to-date language or look at other communities and how to utilize them and first and foremost to get the, guidance and input of the harbor master and other, major stakeholders about how they've been working.
Yeah, they're over 30 years old.
Yeah.
So they need to be freshened up a bit.
We don't have any Vikings anymore, so.
That's good.
We have to bring it up to the electronics age.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's certain elements there that just look obsolete from a time point. Okay, no, it's cool.
And the group that is on the governance subcommittee, they're all, 3 of the 4 of them are attorneys, so, it's kind of fallen out of bed, so.
Yeah. So let me just expound on a point, and I had a discussion. So Harbor Committee is what we have here. CHIP was formed, I think it was saying CHIP and governance were formed. And at that time, I think it was to try and make the Harbor Committee more nimble in a way, because you have to do things with open meetings. That's just how I saw part of it, and to broaden. Well, I'll let you comment. You look like you want to, but let me just finish. So CHIP originally, it was Tim Davis, who's still on this committee and still on CHIP, and Mike and I. And it did serve its purpose and still serves its purpose. It's very easy to get a quorum and very easy to continue to have meetings when we want to have meetings because it's nimble that way. And since the time that was formed, Mike and I joined Harbor Committee. So we have these committees. Other big committees also can set up anytime ad hoc subcommittees and meet. As long as they meet under open meeting, have at it. The other one is the governance subgroup. That met, with the exception of you, there's 3 people on that committee who are not on Harbor Committee. They were appointed officially by Select Board. And so that group, as well as CHIP, operates independently, bringing ideas before Harbor Committee,
Correct.
who will then be, call it, advised by those groups. And then it is up to us to decide whether or not to take that advice and further it up the chain to the select board.
I believe that Chip, you were also appointed to Chip by the selectmen.
We were.
Right, so,
No, and that's the-
who really cares about the history? But the reason that the two groups were formed originally, I mean, Lori, I think you remember then
True.
since
Lucky
forever.
Ex officio.
On everything.
Well,
Was because if you look at the master plan, there's 52 recommendations in there. It's, you know, it's unwieldy. And so the hope, because we sat down with the planning director, was to distill it down to, you know, looking at, you know, rules and regs and implementation of projects. So that was
Okay.
more the guiding light, I think, than getting quorums. But I think it was just trying to distill the big piece, but it works that way too.
Yeah. And I'll just highlight in my interpretation, and I think I made this clear in the prior meeting, Lori, by virtue of her office, is on this committee,
Right.
lucky her. Also is a voting member of the committee, just a regular standing member of the committee.
Wait, a yes voting, not a non-voting or
No,
voting? I'm
she's
sorry.
voting.
Voting.
She is a
Okay.
regular member of the committee, we vote like every other committee member. Let me ask Mike, what is your take on these or other priorities?
I was wondering about the governance side of things, and governance side of things also has a relationship potentially to the resiliency issue. A lot of potential mitigation may not just fall on Cohasset, but Cohasset property, it may fall on Situate property. And I think that basically that should be something that is a priority relative to staying ahead of it, or trying to stay ahead of it, as George was saying, as opposed to reacting down the line.
And I was just distracted. What is the it that needs to be a priority there?
The governance as it relates to resiliency.
Okay, thank you. Their role and participation and resiliency.
Well, I think
Yeah.
that because we basically there's two towns sharing our water body, and resiliency recommendations may impact things like seawalls and breakwater and all that kind of stuff.
Across the town lines.
Yes.
Yep, very good.
MOUs.
Now, are you on the governance subcommittee?
No, I'm not.
But you're on the CHIP.
I am on CHIP.
So and then who's on the governance? Should we just review those?
It's David Farag. Oh, yeah. Debbie Shad. Barbara Canny. Me, and then there was several other offices, you know, like that, as needed, you know, the DPW, and the harbor master is also on there, but the others are just as needed, you know, consultations from other offices of the town.
Mike, what else comes to, what else do you observe?
Well, as related to the Butler estate, there is a group that has been meeting informally to discuss strategies regarding the potential acquisition of the property and also its uses. As you may all know, that there's substantial dock footage on that property, which may or may not become available to the public.
Wow.
But that's something that will be, obviously something that we might have an interest in trying to
Mhm.
promote.
It was that, yep.
If there's, let me say, if there's a public access to the property, depending on who is the purchaser. Obviously, if it becomes private property, it's, you know, probably moot, but if it becomes some kind of a funded nonprofit and or publicly owned combination, then there's that potential for you know, trying to affect the usage of dockage for community use in some fashion, whether you pay fees for it or whether you don't. There's a fair amount of linear footage on that dock for sure, and it's possible, I don't know, but it's possible it could even be extended some, but
So let me ask, are you, what I have here, Butler Estate, and we're informed and sort of a question on who might be involved on Harbor Committee. Are you involved on Harbor Committee?
I am on the Harbor Committee.
No, are you involved on Butler Estate discussions?
I've been in several of them, and I've missed a bunch of them. And I've been involved in them primarily from land use standpoint.
Okay.
There's also an architect that's been involved from a building use standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm somewhat familiar with some of the thinking. But,
Well,
but they have to raise a lot of money to buy this place.
I mean, this is priorities. I'd like to think these are longstanding priorities.
Yeah, they're-
Obviously,
yeah.
this becomes moot if it's acquired by a private,
Yeah.
somebody else. But I think it's great that we can keep it on the list with you as an auditing
I mean,
the
it's been on the
meetings.
market for a long time, at least,
Yeah.
about 6 months, nothing's happened that I'm aware of any
What do they want
suitors.
for it now? 18
I thought it
million.
was
The asking
18
price is
million.
18. I bet you could get it for less.
No, they're certainly,
I
They're
won't be
certainly-
bidding.
they're certainly angling for less, but who knows whether or not
Yeah.
that ever gets anywhere, but
I don't want to take too much time because I know you want to get this to the agenda, but could maybe the next meeting we talk about, or maybe give us a sense of, I've heard different various people involved in this effort. Has it given any encouragement by the town or any,
to be honest with you, I couldn't speak to that. I don't
Yeah,
know
I'm
whether
just
there's
wondering.
any behind the scenes
yeah,
conversations with the town relative to usage or participation.
Somebody at town meeting mentioned it,
Oh, yeah.
remember?
Ralph Dormitz about it.
sure,
Yeah.
sure, but I'm just wondering. if
The
there's-
building's really not conducive for town hall type usage.
I mean, I think.
It'd be
the
nice as a
only
harbor
reason
master's
it- you
office.
know, Anyway.
Yeah.
There's a substantial amount of deferred maintenance on the building and a whole bunch of things that would be, in my opinion, it would be probably a liability that the town can't even take care of a wood frame building. I'm not sure it can take care of a building like that, so
Very pretty liability.
it's a pretty liability.
Let me hear from others.
Hello.
Sean, I don't know if that's you or trying to say hi. Can you hear us okay, Sean? I know we have Mike and Deidre on the line as
He
well,
might
but
be
hopefully.
driving through the rain.
Let me just, who would like to jump in next? I don't need to go around the table. Lisa?
Thank you very much.
Susan, your opinion on priorities, whether these are a good going in position or whether we're missing some. And then after that, I do want to open this up to others not on the committee to share their perspective on these priorities.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether we want to be a little bit more involved than just informed on some of these. And the shellfish bylaw implementation, are we responsible for implementing that? No, that's select board, isn't it?
I think I'm proposing that any of these topics would be good candidates for the Harbor Committee to be involved in because of the nature of the topic and select board. Under the assumption that there's more work to be done to make shellfish bylaw a reality, we are the most likely subcommittee advising the select board to do that work.
Right.
That's why I have it there.
The fishing fleet with the dredging, and forgive me if I'm wrong, I might be speaking out of turn here, but putting the fishing fleet obviously is high on the priority because I've just heard this through conversations that Cohasset is a federal harbor. Is that right?
No, it is not.
It is not a federal harbor, even though it has a commercial fishing fleet.
That's correct. We are a small boat recreation harbor.
Okay,
We are
so I
not
heard
even
wrong.
commercial. Commercial
Isn't-
harbors are like Boston,
Gloucester.
Salem, Gloucester, Lynn, New Bedford that are bringing in cargo and tonnage.
Okay.
Much bigger.
Well, what I was gonna say, but it's moot now, that having a federal harbor, don't they get funding easier with respect to dredging and things like
Not
that?
necessarily.
Really? Okay.
And that whole harbor refuge thing, that's also, we're not
We're
that
not
either.
a harbor.
Okay, so now we all know that.
So
Okay.
let me, so I'll continue with assumptions. My assumption is that if we are actively supporting a commercial fishing fleet, that it puts us in a more favorable position to get funding possibly for dredging. And that was my assumption.
No,
So what is, how do we petition? Simply we're on the list and
We-
they grant it to
we
towns
fill
and
out-
harbors?
we fill out an application, a very long application. They, when the true need arises, the last dredging we got was because of Hurricane Sandy.
Yeah.
And, we got it because just after Sandy hit, the Army Corps of Engineers did a survey of the channel. And I requested, or I asked the project manager at Army Corps what the survey results were, because I knew it had changed a lot with Sandy. And because we said that, we were able to get the dredging, because there were Sandy funds. That's why we got that dredging.
Oh, man. So I, at some point, I thought that we were on a automatic, like.
No.
Okay.
No.
I beg your pardon, I've been misspeaking on that a lot. So it's on a time by time, we decide to need,
They decide, Army Corps decides the need. We do
Oh.
not,
Oh.
unless we wanna pay for it ourselves.
But I think you said your strategy is when there's really a need, like we have boats that can't get out of the channel, that's when you sort of
Once-
try to seize the moment.
Well, once the shoreline of the harbor is decided of what's gonna be there, I will fill out an application to Army Corps, because one of the things you add is the infrastructure and shops and what's along the shoreline. And the revenues from those businesses and how they are affected by the harbor. That's one aspect
So
of the
the commercial
application.
fishing fleet fits into that category.
It gets put in there and
Yes.
everything. But also all the transient business we do gets put in there.
Okay,
And the fact that they go downtown and they spend money. And you have to be an open, very open harbor to get the dredging. And it's basically when it becomes dire, they'll do something. The last dredging project, the first phase of it did not go well. So the Army,
Full boats.
the Army Corps brought in the Currituck, which was a hopper dredge. And they cleaned out the channel for us. They did a great job.
Yeah.
And they dumped the material off of Green Harbor. That is a dumping site.
Okay.
Just outside of the harbor there. Since then, Minot Beach and North Situate Beach has become a designated area,
no kidding.
which would mean instead of just making 2 trips a day, they could make like a half a dozen trips, because it's a much shorter run. It's not 2 hours down, 2 hours back.
Wow, that's huge, I think.
When they did that dredging, at that time, you could rent the Currituck to do dredging. Green Harbor
Did it themselves.
does it, or they did, I don't know if they
It's a
still
private
do.
boat, right?
No, it's owned by the Army Corps of Engineers,
okay.
but you can, at that time, and this is back, 6, 7 years ago, it was $18,000 a day. But we still have to go through all the permitting and the testing and everything. But that is something we could do to keep the channel open.
What is your, if you were to characterize the status of the channel now, where would you say we are sort of in the dredging?
Oh, I
timeframe?
don't know. Now and what the condition is now, what the condition's gonna be after this storm,
Right.
would be 2 different things.
Mhm.
Depends upon how much sand gets pushed in by storms.
There's no eelgrass out there to hold the sand anymore.
And what happened to all the eelgrass?
Don't know.
It's low out there at Whitehead when you're going out at low tide. At Dolphin, at low. It's
It seems like a lot of the flats has moved.
Mhm.
I was gonna do that today and it wasn't low enough for me to actually collect the data that I was gonna collect. But I'll have a little map of that soon with my middle schoolers, I believe. But it seems like the sediments on the flats have really moved and there's less flats at low tide than there has been in the past. I know that all the eelgrass all of it is gone, except for in one little pocket north of the glades. So that used to be really dense and that would have held a lot of the sediments in place. The other thing that would have held a lot of sediments in place were all those mussel beds that were inside of White Rock. They were all held together by abyssal threads. Those are gone. So we don't really have anything holding the sediments except the sediments. So things are likely to shift more, I would think. But you have more experience in seeing how these things roll out than I do. But I don't know that we've ever seen Cohasset Harbor without eelgrass and without mussels to this extent.
So let me, not to cut it short, good discussion, but Sean, if you can hear us, do you have any comments on priorities? And Lori, I'll ask that of you as well. I don't know if we still have Sean.
He's
Lori?
here.
He's
Good.
driving, so he might-
Well, when you chime in, we will listen, Sean. Lori, do you have any comments on either priorities that should be added or priorities that maybe should be struck?
The Government Island Pier right now is with Conservation Commission. And once it gets through Conservation Commission, then it'll get its permits that it needs. Then we have to find $4 million. The town will have to come up with at least 25%. And
To
we,
that end, Lori, on something like that, as far as the role of the harbor committee, when that need is established, it seems like this is a natural group to help go to selectmen and lobby and support as it just echo.
Much broader than that. You have
Yeah.
a huge school coalition that's looking for the same capital as we are.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of other groups,
Huge.
on the capital committee.
Right.
I have to live with all those folders on my dining room table.
I think Lori has described it.
Yeah.
This is 4 to 5 million and the town has to put up 25% at least to
Right.
get Seaport Economic Council's contribution. You
Right.
shared with me that the max they'll give us $1 million.
That's
So we
right.
need to
Right.
find another source
Right.
for a
And
few million bucks.
there is another organization in the state.
That is a possible source.
Yeah.
That's $1 million a year, correct? You can go back next year for another $1 million?
We don't-
They won't do that.
Oh, it's one and done, or,
It's for the project with Seaport.
But you couldn't go for another project the next year.
You could for another project, yes, but not the same project.
I mean, Lisa raises a good point, and I think just seeing select board meetings, you really need advocacy to get capital in this town.
Can you
and-
take that project and actually phase it into two components
I don't
and
think
get
so.
the money that way? Like, for instance, all of the lifts and
Yeah.
the conveyor belts and all that kind of stuff, the new docks, all that stuff be one project, but raise the thing, enclose it, whatever, pave it. That's the first phase, then you build all that other stuff off it later.
Seaport won't do it that way.
No.
They'll see it as the project.
And
Yeah.
Foth is designing it as the project,
Yes.
right? The
Yeah.
project.
Auth Engineering is
And that's
doing the work.
Who will be submitting it as that.
Yes, they'll do all the
One
submitting to Seaport Economic. And they'll also submit to other places to get money.
so as far as the role of this group in relation to that indice, I mean, I think it should not so much be, Vienna has for glasses back on,
Maybe it's more-
consulted, but more,
If it gets to the point where we're seeking capital and then we have Montana here who's, charged with helping to get grants. So
Right.
the grants are something, but boy, getting that money out of this town that's the big hunt here.
So maybe we add another category along with the responsible and consulted and informed, and that be advocacy.
Okay,
Seems like an odd, it seems like an odd thing for
Yeah, I like
a
that.
town committee to do. But
well,
I would also say, like what you just said is that it seems like you really do need a lot of advocacy to get any capital moved. And if you start advocating before you go straight to regulation, you can get a lot more public will and maybe a lot more done. So, you know, there's, just as there's many lawyers in Cohasset, there's also a lot of PR people,
and
so.
we'll get to this in the brief discussion of effectiveness that we're gonna have. Let me open this up to others. So I think we have folks online. We have Mike and Noel. Do you have any perspective? I know you're just seeing this list for the first time. Any perspective you'd like to share with Harbor Committee?
I think it's an ambitious to contemplate purchasing Butler Leos. I'm old enough to remember when the town refused to buy it for $500,000. And I know how the town thought that was obscene to think of the town meeting ever voting that much money.
Yeah.
I think it's a $18 million property now. I think it's 9 acres of land almost. It's a
It is, yeah.
significant piece of land. But it's also going to be tremendously subject to sea level rise over the coming years as well. As is all of Margin Street, Stockbridge and so forth. But I think it's really ambitious.
I don't think the town, I don't think there was any, in conversations I've been in, there have not been any conversation about seeking funds from the town. I think it's all private money.
Private money?
Yeah.
Even better.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly.
No one would be competing for town funds. That'd be
Yeah.
No, I think,
And so that
They
private
see the
committee
hand-
has sort
they
of
see the hand-
recognized
they- yeah,
that.
they see the
That's
handwriting on the
not
wall
gonna- not gonna do
relative
that.
so.
Other
So it's
thoughts?
not by town,
Well,
We don't know yet.
misunderstanding that.
But the town made this mistake years ago, not buying it.
That's right.
And there's a tremendous amount of waterfront available with that property. So if you
And
go
cables, right?
fast forward 30 years, we're complaining about dock space, everything else to boot for this harbor because it's mostly privately owned.
Right.
So
I think it's on its way. It's under private control. I'm a big fan of that. I'll do anything I can to support it. Great.
okay.
Now going to the commercial pier. I haven't seen a plan. Is there an actual plan yet? Okay,
And it's available on the town website.
it is, okay.
It is, yeah.
And it's around 4 million at this point.
That's
Here's what I
45.
would never do, and this is actually only occurring to me tonight. I would never push the community dock plan that I've been pushing for the last year if it jeopardized any part of that plan. I'm all in favor of supporting the commercial development plan more than the private dock plan, the community dock plan. One is obviously gonna support the lobster fleet. One is just for contemplated at this point, just dinghies, recreational users.
All right.
So my support would always be behind the commercial development of that
Okay.
pier. And I don't know that they have to be competing with each other,
To be determined, yeah.
okay? So that's all I can say about that at this point.
Thank you. Let me ask, Mike, thank you for joining us today. I understand your role. You're an active lobster fisherman operating out of Cohasset Harbor. Is that accurate?
correct.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that, for being that representative. What, do you have thoughts on this list from that perspective or other perspectives?
Well, I mean, for the fishing fleet and the Government Island Pier, I mean, we gotta take into consideration how old Government Island really is. I mean, what's the age of that pier that we're working off of? Over 100 years. I mean, we saw what happened to the old Salt House. You know, for the town, if something happens to Government Island one of these days, what's it gonna cost them to rebuild? On that, on that side, they have to fund it all themselves, or are they just gonna leave us with a pile they left the old Salt House with?
Certainly,
You know,
thought.
the infrastructure is getting old
Yeah.
and, once we know infrastructure gets old, it's decayed, it's gotta be updated.
Unless it's the pyramids in Egypt.
Correct. Which we're getting close to, but.
Same
anyway,
material.
So, I mean, that would, for the fishing fleet, I know, myself personally, I think it's, it would just be, a huge help for us just because of the work that goes in for us to bring gear home every year. I mean, I watch guys, 800 traps up and down that ramp or at the wall. There's a tremendous amount of work when you watch every other harbor that has booms and winches and they, do it with hydraulics and levers, and we're doing it the old fashioned way of just pure muscle.
Yeah.
So
So I'm taking it, that's an important thing.
for the commercial fleet, yes, that's an important.
And you're one of the younger members of the commercial fleet, as I understand.
I'm not as young as I used to be, but yes, yeah, we have a few young guys, younger than me now, so it's, that's a good thing, so. And, the fishing industry, we have our ups and downs, but I think there's always gonna be something to bring into that pier, whether it's lobsters or crabs or, whatever species is gonna, populate our waters.
Okay.
So, that'd be one, that'd be high on consideration for me. The shellfish bylaws, I'd like to know more about, just so we don't pass something that's gonna hamstring us in the future.
Mhm.
I mean, people say shellfish, I go scalloping, that is a shellfish, I get nervous when I hear that. I know, the aquaculture that's going on now is, a thorn on some people's side. But, as things change, like you say, the flags have changed, we're losing the eelgrass, there could be a possibility for the fishing fleet to do aquaculture outside of that zone in the future, and not just oysters. There's kelp, there's oysters, there's surf clams.
Finfish.
Are there steam clams still out there?
I would suppose so. I mean, I went digging years ago up in the mud flats where, and I didn't
Way
find
back,
any,
like
but
20 years ago.
I think in the sand there still is. I mean, I see shells on the other
Steamers,
side.
did you ask?
So,
When I was in high school, I used to
Some.
dig them by the bushel out there, and then
Wow.
all of a sudden there was nothing, and that was.
there's razor clams, I know.
There's some steamers, but there's more razor clams. The
I just
steamer's a
didn't
little
know
harder
if
to
you
find,
still
I
get
think.
steamers out there.
So I just say, caution when we start talking about bylaws.
Right.
And I think what Lori said about updating the regulations, we have some concerns on the commercial fishing fleet that should be updated.
And that'd be great, and, once, and when the process of looking at all these things, we need everybody's input.
Right.
And I'm a big fan, as I think everybody here is, about, having appropriate input, and time for people to think about it.
Mhm.
What one is proposing.
Let me, just in the interest of time, we have.
George, real quickly, Mike Dick has his hand raised.
Oh, Mike, can you hear me?
I can you hear me?
Yes, Mike, you have the floor. Thank you.
Just want to remind this group that there is a long-range financial planning group that has created a list of important projects that the town faces, and that the government wharf project really needs to be on that list. Now, that is chaired by Jean Healy-Dippold.
Okay.
Rob Hillman is on that group, who is chair of advisory, and Brian Host is on that group, chair of capital budget.
Are you involved in that group, Mike?
Not any longer. It's just those three, and the town finance directors.
And remind me again what the official name of that group is?
Long-range financial planning is the way I know it.
Okay. I think that's a high priority for us to review that
Right.
list.
And we should- We
Yeah.
should not automatically assume that there are others with sharper elbows out there.
No,
This is as important as a school when it comes to the economic livelihood of people who live here. And needs to be on that list with people advocating for it.
Then-
Mike, thank you for that.
Maybe dredging
Sure.
too, is, because it seems like you really have to get out in front of the dredging in order to get it done before we're all socked in, right?
I think,
For
if-
it, for it to go on that list, Susan, there really needs to be a project that has got some bones to it, rather than just saying, we know we're going to need to dredge in the next X number of years, but that's
Okay.
worth pursuing. You asked a lot of good questions about, okay, how silted in is it right now, and so forth. Those facts need to be developed and
Yeah.
put together and then brought to the select board, really. I mean, the Long Range Financial Planning Group is an advisory group to the select board, but it's the select board's duty.
That's a great input, and I was sort of looking for that, Mike. So thank you for sharing that. That needs to be a high priority for our group to participate in that list and understand what their project requirements are to have bones, so that we can fulfill that.
Yeah, but does anyone know what that means? I don't know what that
Well,
means.
we're going to meet with them to find out.
Exactly.
We don't know.
Yeah.
That's why I'd say we need to start that dialogue.
I mean, I don't know the difference between dredging and bones.
No. It's,
I
the
know it's an
project needs to
expression,
be, not just dredging. Any project needs to have definition about what its capital needs are, more than just saying dredging or pier or seawalls. So we need, they need to be defined projects. And I think we're in a position to do that. Let me, so what I've got still, they're not necessarily in order, but we can keep them. Captain's Walk, Government Island Pier, I've heard good feedback for that. Couple of things with the governance review and update bylaws, shellfish bylaw to review that. And I think we have Mike at least auditing the Butler estate, so we'll keep that on here. And I guess Bassing's Beach and aquaculture, we'll keep our eyes open on that, but not doing any specific work. I think the timeframes on these are, they're different, so we don't have to do them all at once. Particularly dredging doesn't have a time frame yet. The Government Island Pier we can anticipate is a next year time frame. Captain's Walk is this year time frame. So maybe I can put some calendar quarters in this so that it will help us focus on what we need to focus on sooner. But then, topics like Mike brought up.
And also for when, in the proposed role, because of the discussion we just had, I would change consultant and on the Government Island Pier and the commercial fishing fee informed. I would have, develop recommendations. Because
Okay.
that's what we're supposed to be doing on behalf of the selectmen,
All right.
to present to.
Yeah.
And then on the Government Island Pier, we would definitely want to see to, if there was an association of fishermen that were wanting to take that role on, then they would be, I would say, a priority voice compared to ours. But
They've contributed greatly to the design on that already.
Directly, without going through Harbor Committee.
With going with
Yeah.
Lori and Michelle
Okay.
Leary and others, right?
Yes, they met with the engineers.
Okay, good. Keep us posted on what you
Yeah,
guys
no,
think.
I thought, we went through the design, I thought it was the best design for what we have.
Cool.
We have to work with, I thought it made the most sense.
Yeah, that was also part of a chip thing.
It was,
Because you and I and Jim went to
but it was the
multiple
earlier
meetings.
design. I sort of missed out on the.
We went through a couple
current
design
design.
phases, we
Yeah.
had some really big plans.
Yeah.
But this one, it makes more sense and economically,
Yeah, it's out
it's a
of
little
the
cheaper
velocity
and,
zone.
yeah.
some-
The one benefit we have of being this committee is the actual bylaw provides that to give recommendations to the town meeting. So we have a chance
Yeah.
to actually have a voice there and impact positively what we want to happen on behalf of Laura and the fishermen.
Let's spend a few minutes on the next topic, improving Harbor Committee effectiveness.
There we go. Hey,
I want to do this. We'll spend a little bit of time. I want to make sure, because I promised Neil that we would spend a little bit of time talking about his topic. Thank you, and thank you for being here as well, and others online. I only bring up effectiveness. I started this discussion with Tim Davis last year, that we talk about a lot of stuff, but it wasn't clear what we actually did, and there wasn't a lot of transparency in terms of how we move it forward. So I wanted it's a really easy focus. So I proposed, and actually what I've read through here, I've observed particularly Mike Sardina and Tim and others working with the Elm Street group, just the hundreds of hours put into something that ultimately doesn't look like it's going to succeed, and very frustrating. And so that's part of my lesson. Neil's been involved in town government for a million years. You have Lisa. So I'm new to it, but I want to make sure that we're working on things with an eye to the prize, which is how do we work smart and how do we manage our influence to actually get things done that we think warrant getting done. So to that end, focus on the mission. What do? We're not a yes/no voting committee. We don't have power over anybody. We have influence. We've been charged by the select board with bringing issues and researching issues. We have the ability to call town meetings or public meetings. And we certainly have the ability to hold not hearings, but hold forums where we can influence people. So we have a lot of influence. And I think there's an expectation of us to vet issues that are related to the harbor. And we want to meet up with that. I think we've gone through, there's good ideas. Just say that the municipal harbor plan had 52 good ideas, or maybe more. So we are having to be selective based on current events. What I've seen as a critical thing, at least in my view, the past 2 years, is gaining strong support. It's not enough to try and persuade select board. It's really important to have abutters, neighbors, broader citizenry behind anything we do that requires money or that requires permission, which is pretty much everything.
That goes to the advocacy that I mentioned earlier.
It's advocacy. It's just citizen. It calls it
Buy-in.
Public will, yeah.
Yeah. And then on top of that, the harbor is by and large a highly regulated space. It's public. It's owned by this town. At least part of it is. Part of Cohasset's owned by the town. But it's regulated by title, Chapter 91. It's regulated by Concom with practically everything along the edge. It's regulated by a lot of stuff. So we're a starting point, and I think it's going to be real important that we not just think about collaborating, it's critical to collaborate in order to get anything done. We've heard from the select board that funding, if you don't have funding for something that costs money, it's not going very far. So whether we have to have funding, we have to have a funding plan, whether it involves applying for grants. And if you get a grant, you move forward. Like Elm Street. If you don't get a grant, better luck next time. So I think having a funding plan is key. These are things I think of as with any project we undertake these are some guidelines I'm thinking of. What other from the seasoned people in the room or from town employees in the room, what are some other things that we need to think about to be effective?
I think one of the biggest things that was hampering our success in the past was, as you mentioned at the very beginning, having a standing meeting, having a meeting at 7 o'clock for those of us, many members here, work full time or have other endeavors that they can't be at 4:30 in the afternoon meetings or be at, 5 o'clock meetings, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the scheduling, having a standing meeting, George, and also having a time that professionals or anyone can make. I think that we're very lucky we have the hybrid option,
Yeah.
We got something good out of COVID.
Yeah.
And I think it's very, very important to everyone to have a responsibility on the committee, because it's easy to not go to a meeting if you really don't have homework or if you don't have to do something. But if everybody is engaged, you enjoy it, you're being productive, and will be successful. Whereas in the past, I think it was kind of one-dimensional, and I think people weren't engaged, and so they didn't attend. And so I'm hoping that is a different tempo going forward.
So let me just build on that. I started the meeting by saying, there's a few of us who have sort of decided what we like to do and are trying to do it outside of the meeting. I'm leaving it to others, Martin, Sean, others. And that's how I'm proposing to leave it, but I would love you to think about what you see here and identify, and then we'll have Derek coming in and
How often does this group, I guess, if we're charged with presenting to the Board of Selectmen or making recommendations, how often do we actually communicate with that board?
As
it's-
needed, kind of.
it's up to us.
Yeah.
I've been, I've not had an official communication with them. I'm sort of waiting to have something to say.
Mm.
That being said, I had extensive one-on-ones with Jean Healy Dipole around the lawsuits, et cetera, between between,
Fidelity.
so used to that, between Cohasset and Situate. But I think it's up to us. And what I would propose on that is that we have something to say, and we say, here's our thinking, just want to share it with you. You know, we'll get 5 minutes of fame with select board. If we have something more than that, we'll take more.
Yeah.
I would
It's
love
hard
to,
to get on the agenda too, for the selectmen's.
I'm just thinking out of sight, out of mind, if nobody's in
Right.
front of them, they
Right.
don't.
Right.
no, I think with these priorities, this is an opportunity.
Mhm.
It'd be nice to have
Concrete
something
things.
even more meaty, but
Right.
this is meaty
Sure.
enough to say, here's what we're thinking of. Do you think we have it right? And is there anything you think we should be focused on in addition?
I mean, the committee chair was before the selectmen, several times over the years, especially when we had to create the master plan. The master plan had to be adopted in order for like some of the 91 flexibility. I mean, things, there were like deadlines that had to be met. And that's why we were before.
Wait, you mean master plan or harbor plan?
The
Municipal harbor plan.
Municipal harbor plan, sorry, it's called it master.
So to that end, we haven't done it yet, but I would propose, it'll be pretty much up to me and Montana to get on the select board agenda. I would propose we do that with these priorities. And once we have a time and a date, the more
Work toward
of us that can participate, either in person or via Zoom, the better. And we'll be transparent about that. That's key.
Yeah, I was gonna say, relative to my experience on Elm Street, and as it relates to this charge that we have, that one of the things I found that was a little bit disappointing relative to that process on Elm Street, and I was not obviously on the inner circle relative to the powers that be in town.
But you were on the Elm Street.
But we
Working
had,
group.
but we had a select board member on the working group. That was Diane Kennedy. But we were never asked as a working group to come before the select board and give a status as to where we are.
Okay.
Consequently, I think only one member of the current select board was actually even in office at the time that this was going on. So since everything takes so damn long to happen in this town, you could have a whole change of administration when something finally comes to the fore and they have no idea about what had happened
The history.
before or the history of it, and or the town or the neighbors or the butters' participation in it. And they then have a completely different take on it because priorities have changed. As one of the select board members said to somebody that I know, he said, well, elections have consequences. And which is absolutely true, because it's not a remarkable statement, but it's a true statement. So my proposal is that if we have a charge, that we should somehow get before the select board just to give them a status report on what we're thinking, because they have no idea what we're doing. And they really don't have a representative here, and they have different priorities, and maybe they will, wave us off and say, that's great, but we have other fish to fry here. At least at that time, we would know, and we wouldn't be wasting our time.
And should that be through select board or should that be through that long range financial planning group that Mike?
Quite honestly, I was thinking that at some point we should have a status report in front of the powers that be on these advisory committees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just because they need to know. For instance, Captain's Walk involves town money associated with just resiliency issues. We're not gonna get 100% of the money necessary from the state or the feds. So it's just a good idea for people to know.
What you're saying is, to proactively request to be on the agendas, particularly select board, but also other key committees.
Yeah,
whether it's
I
Concom
don't, it can't
or
hurt.
some of the others, and keep them informed of what we're
There
doing.
should be, and there used to be every standing committee, which there is one, has a liaison assigned from the select board. It used to be, I'm really digging myself, Jack Kanilan, you know, so there must be somebody in some list that
There
we
is.
can find out who the liaison supposedly is, and
And I would offer, there is, I mean, like Tom Bell was the liaison to us. He came last year a few times.
was he on the selectmen? I'm talking about a selectman
Well,
liaison,
okay,
yeah,
that would be, um,
Was it
Jack,
Jack, all right,
and he usually did come.
right.
But I think we also know that Jack came, but we don't know.
What was translated
conveyed to
back,
select
yep.
board. So I agree with Mike, if there's something we really care about,
Sure,
we need to trust the communication to ourselves.
Mike Dick's hand is raised.
Hi, Mike, you have the floor.
Hi, resiliency is going to be your, I believe, will be your key. That is the topic that will make the select board and the other town boards sit up and take notice. So I think it's important and you're ready now to go and talk with them about resiliency. This committee has done an awful lot of work in that area. And so it is certainly time now to go to the select board and say, we want to talk with you about the work we've been doing. First on our list is resiliency.
And Mike, what I'm taking from that is don't bury it under Captain's Walk.
Correct.
Thank you.
I could easily see that moved out because Captain's Walk, I think, is really beautiful stuff that you put on top of, and you even decorate some like awfully ugly resiliency measures with some beautiful cultural artwork and walk and that kind of stuff. But if it's, if the resiliency is, that stuff has to be engineered properly.
Yeah.
He also
Good chosen.
So should we move resiliency out of Captain's Walk?
Yeah. Everybody agree with that?
Do we need
Right.
to have a
And-
motion to do that?
No,
Okay.
this is just a working document.
If I could just offer one other thought, and that is,
Yep, please do, Mike.
you frame it in terms of risk to the town.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So it's
all
infrastructure
about.
risk. And that can bring in government wharf. Now, I know it's very controversial about the elevation of that wharf, but I believe it was designed that way to accommodate sea level rise.
Yep. Mike, great contributions. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, I guess I'm not looking for resolution on Harbor Committee effectiveness, but maybe again, sort of bearing that in mind as each of us chooses the projects we're going to do. How do we make sure that we're thinking of our mission? And also, you're all open members of Harbor Committee. Some of you are not at-large members. You're representing CSCR or the Yacht Club, et cetera, or CMI. I think, making sure you're thinking and keeping that constituency involved, but working for the good of the town is what we're trying to do here.
Can I point, a few years ago, I had requested that when people have updates of things that are of relevance to the town, that this is there should be a time on the agenda where we share those. So because everybody has different, things that come up, and
It's sort of new business, which we're overlapping with right now.
but updates that we all should know about.
I mean,
Sounds
actually, I'll speak to that very briefly. You asked about the select board is
This, like,
in a lawsuit
yeah.
with the DMF.
Yeah, that I need to know about that.
Well, you can read about it and it's well explained on the town website, but basically the concern with the NAV bylaw is that it was, it's in effect, but it was done without looking at the potential liability of the town of Cohasset for sewage overflow from the sewage treatment plant. And I think there may be either an implied or real liability of an abutting town to indemnify the next town if our sewage overflow ruins their oyster beds. And the town, that's the select board is frankly more concerned about that from what I can tell than navigational hazards and other stuff.
This sounds like a shell game to me.
Well, whatever.
But
You asked what this, that's, anybody have
That's-
anything to
That's
add to that?
ridiculous. That seems like a real long stretch to get some other things to happen. And
But the litigation.
you know, when things gets that obtuse,
Hey,
you know that they're trying to do something
No,
different.
just to simplify this, this is the litigation is to question the certification by the government agency, the state agency. And it's just an appellate review of a state agency certification. It happens all the time. And I'm saying is, they're challenged all the time. A town has a right to challenge them. And it's an interesting way of looking at it that is novel, that hasn't been discussed before. So
So we're trying to get our flats that are currently closed to shellfishing, open to shellfishing.
I don't know if that's
So-
part of
so
it.
let me-
I'm referring to just the litigation around a
Yeah.
regulatory determination.
Because that's what the DMF
pricing.
says right now, is
well,
that
but this is
the-
specifically related
Right.
to the disapproval of the navigation bylaw and Situate putting oyster beds where it's putting them.
but
it's
that was
not-
struck down for many other reasons that had nothing to do with DMF.
It may not,
Yeah.
but. be
But
that as
I
it may.
would commend to everybody's attention. It's right on the town website.
The town
Meetings,
website.
it has the commentary by the town. I know that there's gonna be some other filings coming out in the next couple of weeks.
And just, I believe the town, I know I get them. I get a Friday email
Mhm.
to my Cohasset Mass email address. I don't know if other people get them. If you have a cohassetmass.org email address, you get updates that include things like this.
Yeah.
So you can be.
You might only get it if you're the chairman of the committee.
No, so. everybody-
Because I went into the town hall and asked about that, and they said, oh, we usually just do it to the chair of the committee. And I asked if I could be on it, and they said yes. So you might have to actually ask.
Maybe. I used to get them before I was chair, that's for sure. Let's move on to picking a time for new dates. Does anybody have a point of view of, I'm proposing that we meet a minimum of 6 times a year. I was choosing every odd month. Folks like rec meet at this time of day every month, so it doesn't help to change odd or even. A lot of folks are meeting first, second, and third times of the week because the fourth is usually intersecting with Thanksgiving, Christmas, and some other times. I can choose one and propose it over email.
Yeah, could you do that, Judge? Because I have to check my work calendar and then I'm looking at all these dates.
So-
I mean, the fact is, conflicting with planning board is not, to me, a big conflict.
Mhm.
Conflicting with select board, I X'd out just on its face, so we don't do Tuesdays. But I can choose something, I do think we have some interaction with Concom, they have not a lot, but some. So I'm gonna look at these dates and propose something new and I guess get
Okay.
responses back,
That'd be helpful, thank you.
okay? Want to move to the open business and Neil?
Oh,
No, I'm sorry,
it's quite all right.
my fault.
After 3 times, I have to draw it to your.
Please do, please do. I'm mixing up names right and left. So Noel and I discussed was dinghy pier. It was discussed, and so anyway, added to the agenda. Don't have a lot of time, but I think the proposal that we talked about, Noel, was potentially to do some work on this outside of this meeting. So
Thank
it
you.
doesn't have to be decided today, but
Thanks for taking time to talk with me this afternoon. George was gracious enough to talk me down from the rafters because I was getting a little frustrated at the pace at which we're processing my petition through this committee, which we started last year. And that's as much my fault as anybody's. Maybe it's entirely my fault. But I've always, I've done enough petitions and applications before various boards, committees that, generally it's pushed along, sometimes to the negative department, sometimes to the positive department. And it's kind of been very difficult to get a positive read. I haven't really gotten a lot of positive feedback when I have appeared in front of your committee. And what I've been deliberately doing is not trying to enlist public support, because I think it's more important at this point of the process for you to do some quiet planning, as opposed to if it was opened up to participation from people who want to put a dinghy down in the harbor. My understanding from being in town for a while is that there's going to be a lot of those people. there's a list. I don't know how long the list is now for a mooring. I think it's over 300 people. I'm not sure. I think it's 25 years or more to get a mooring in this town. And it's my understanding that if you don't have a mooring, you don't get a space on the town docks. And that only came to my attention when I recently got my own mooring. I've been piggybacking on my parents' mooring for the last 50 plus years. So if you don't have a mooring, you don't get to put a dock on a dinghy in the harbor on a town dock. And it's a 25-year wait for a town mooring. So even though we don't have a formal waiting list for a dinghy space, those are the facts. That's the result. The result's the same. It's 25 years plus. If the town were to say, here's a new dock for people who just have an interest in putting a dinghy down there, maybe you have an opinion at this point of whether that's going to be desirable. I do. I have a pretty strong opinion that would fill up pretty quick.
And,
Go ahead.
and no, let me try and just provide a little context. Again, given the time, I haven't given you a lot. I asked Noel to share background, maybe to review the project again, but with the thought, we're not asking this group to make a decision today.
Of course not, no.
But sometimes that's not clear. And this gets to the process of what happened to that meeting in January and nothing happened. So this is a adding to the agenda and with the thought that you would participate with Mike and me in the Captain's Walk Working Group to look at this within a broader context, focused on this, but in a broader context.
Okay.
I just wanted to share that.
So that seems a little bit consistent with saying that the Captain's Walk is separate from resilience. And that the Captain's Walk has a lot of, wait, just let me finish that, has a lot of niceties. And this is a nice thing. This is a nicety. This is increasing access of regular people to enjoy the harbor, which is very different from a major engineering thing that needs to hold back the ocean. So I could see this lumped in with the Captain's Walk and the niceties of culture and recreation and access.
And I think you hit on it. My thought on this is it's lumped in with recreation.
Yeah.
But the Captain's Walk is a bunch of stuff. I mean, it's historical commission, it's
Yeah, we may wanna
walkways, it's
read-
roads, it's parking, it's sidewalks, it's a lot of stuff. But I think recreation and access to the harbor, this is a good place for it, and we have the ability to roll up our sleeves on it.
I'd like to see it remain as a standalone project, only because otherwise it's probably doomed, or at least put so far out, it's unmanageable. And I think it's very simple. In my opinion, the dock spaces, the town dock spaces in the Cove are gone.
Again, just do a quick walkthrough of what we're seeing
Do you
in this
want me
picture.
to stand up there?
If you want,
Okay.
just so, we're super clear on what you're asking.
Well, we're not gonna see the Cove from here or the creek. Here's the sailing club dock arrangement. Okay. Here's your commercial pier, which is going to be extensively renovated and improved. This is Mike, thanks for doing this plan. This is the proposed area where the new dock would be located. This is the pier. We cannot go from the seawall. The seawall that goes from the commercial pier to the sailing club, we're just about in the middle. There's a very well-defined area that's very rocky, that the lobster boats never lay up on. That is never gonna be affecting any lobster boat traffic. That's where we're gonna put the pier. And that's really 2 steel pilings, maybe 1, but that's it. It's de minimis in terms of disturbance of existing conditions. And so it's from the seawall out to a point where the ramp would go down to the dock. Now, there's an existing mooring there, been there a long time. I think it's a 17 or 18-foot mooring. Let's say it's 20, because that's easy to say. If it's 20, and it goes, and this is the mooring, it goes 20 feet this way and 360 degrees, as they all do, then you've got a 40-foot diameter mooring, 2 sides, 80 feet. That's a lot more than we have on Parker Ave. Parker Ave is one side of dinghy spaces. The rest is supposed to be open for landings. Obviously, it's a busy neighborhood.
So Noel, let me, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
I just want to share, these are the meeting minutes from our last discussion. And my proposal to Noel and what we've agreed on is, it was these issues that came up even in discussion in January, and that we need to work them through. That they weren't answered, and there's a number of them that are pretty significant. And to flesh this out in such a way that there could be a proposal to select board. There's these questions, demographic groups, parking, dinghies, priority of the pier. And then, what we talked about being effective, support from citizens, abutters, how is it funded? What about parking? What about approvals for, all the regulatory approvals that may be needed? Those are things that, you want to have at least a plan when you go before select board, that you're either aware of it and working on it, or you've addressed it.
What would we like to do about this right now?
Excuse me, but before we
Go
go
ahead.
past this, I didn't come up with the 10 dinghy number at that time, and I believe it's almost twice that.
Okay,
I never suggested that it be restricted, that the new pier be restricted to seniors. I restricted that in private conversation with one person, a colleague from mine from the sailing club, and he was so opposed, I withdrew it. He subsequently came to 2 meetings to make sure that I didn't go
Oh,
back
well,
on my
okay.
word.
well,
But
so we'll clarify
that's
that.
not, that's never been an issue that I've put forward.
I mean, it was captured, it came up in the meeting.
Yeah, but it's not from
But,
me.
all right,
So I'm moving forward. And you have to understand, I think it's premature to say that we're going to use this as a dinghy dock. I mean, I think it makes sense. It's in the main harbor. You can go to the cove, you can go up the creek, and go up the Gulf from this dock quite easily. It's centrally located. And I think maybe Parker Ave would be better suited for use as paddle boards and kayaks. I think that all has to be thought about.
Yeah.
All I know is Cove is off, it's gone. There's no parking up there. There was no parking this summer when 2 out of 3 businesses on Border Street were closed. So please don't tell me that we have town dinghy spaces on
well,
Border Street.
getting to Susan's question, and from a timeliness
Sure.
point of view, what we agreed on is to review it in this group. It's already currently captured with my modification as part of the captain's block discussion. And that we would, it's really hard to deliberate in meetings like this with limited information.
Yeah, and we're not an adjudicatory board.
So
Yeah,
that
right.
volunteered that Chip will hold a meeting with Mike or without, but we'll get a meeting and add this as part of the sort of broader context. And I do view this as something that falls into the recreation space, among others, but recreation. And I think that our plan is sort of crying for a recreation overlay that would, I think, draw a lot of public support. So there's that angle to it. It's pretty, some of this other stuff just doesn't excite people. But recreation does.
Yeah,
This is the type of thing you can have a meeting and we can discuss it. We can invite stakeholders to it, people
Yeah,
who are,
focus
lose
meetings.
this area, and, there may be other ideas, for that space or some variation of that space. I mean, you talk about kayakers, you talk about sailboarders, you talk about, the other needs. So, I mean, from my position, I think this is, I appreciate you bringing this to us. I know this has been a long
so
conversation.
do we need to have instead of just a particular dock design, do we need to have it a little bit broader and say that we're trying to solve the problem of parking, dinghies, paddle boards, access to the harbor, and swimming for
We
kids?
need to
There's not a single swim ladder in the whole town.
We need to
right?
explore.
I mean,
I
does
mean-
it make sense to just have the discussion in that context and then figure out what's, if our problems are this, this is a possible solution, but maybe we need to mush solutions together and reorganize some of the assets that we have to, like you said, maybe the ones we have aren't making the most sense.
I look at it as we're starting with Noel and his passion, and we can work with that to broaden out to address some of these other questions. I think there's other opportunities that we haven't explored as a committee, stuff across on Margin Street, other areas where potentially there's opportunities for a
Right.
broader recreation plan, of which this may fit, be one of the puzzle pieces.
So does it go into our priority list? Does it fit into one of our priorities that we
is.
already talked about, or is it a new separate one?
I proposed it's in the Captain's Walk list.
Yeah.
That Chip is gonna be, and governance are both involved in, as well as the rest of the harbor committee. And we'll amend it to say piers and docks,
Yes, which.
if that's okay. Does that sit okay?
But then the Captain's Walk thing, we're pulling resiliency out of that again.
That's the only thing I'm proposing to pull out.
Okay, so sidewalks, parking, roadways, all stay into
Yep.
Captain's Walk?
Yep, for now, yep.
Okay. Even though those are larger
There,
engineered situations.
we're allowed to change our mind later, but for now, that's my proposal.
8:35.
We're at our time. All right, is there any other comments that I haven't allowed for? Oh, we're gonna talk about grants, but we could,
Yeah, super quickly, we were just accepted for MVP 2.0.
Yay,
Yeah,
congratulations.
I will be the project manager. This doesn't mean that we submitted for a project. It's a 2-year timeline. I'm accepting vendor applications. They're due on Friday, so hopefully we land a good organization, and then we'll be creating a core development team of residents, NGO members, business owners, stuff like that. And then we just take it from there. It's an organically made project, so it's really out of my hands. It's up to the core development team what we want to do at the end of the day.
did you have any perspective on participation by this committee?
Yeah, I definitely did. I mean, I can only say so much. Were any of you a part of MVP in 2018, a part of that focus group?
We
Yeah.
help facilitate it, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so we're gonna redo that list, so, I'm just figuring out right now who I think should be a part of that, new members, old people, not old people,
Wait, we'll
sorry,
redo
old
that list,
members.
like that list of priorities that came out of it?
Yeah, so we're gonna
So that would
redo
inform our list of priorities.
Well, and also, I'm sort
And
of
resiliency.
very aware, I've read that report carefully, and MVP 1.0 was a key prereq to getting municipal harbor plan, grants, this and this, it's like a domino series,
Yeah.
so if MVP 2.0
Special
has
requirements,
any
right.
similar effect, it's sort of a prereq that you have to get subsequent grants
Yeah.
in certain areas.
Yeah, and as of right now, that's the only thing we've been accepted for. We have a few other grants in the works, but that is all from me.
Mike, do you have any
MVP
questions?
stand for? What does MVP mean?
Municipal vulnerabilities preparedness. It's like CZM, coastal zone management, it's a state agency that like funnels through the federal grant money.
The last one that was held was a very wide participation by many committees and police and fire and emergency
Individuals,
preparedness and us and open space and electrical, everybody's has their input.
Yeah, my only concern about those kinds of things is that you end up with, that it's equal votes, everybody gets one dot to express their priorities. And, you know, what if I have my priorities, but I'm not informed as an engineer or something, you know, I mean, I think that's, sometimes it's helpful to have, or it's definitely helpful to have people who know things go to those MVP things so that the priorities actually reflect some collective wisdom and not just collective yayas.
Well, we'll just have to keep an open mind.
Well, I think it's a great role for all of us to get people who know things to get there. Like get the fishermen who know stuff there, get the engineers who know stuff, make sure Lori's there, make sure the police is there, make sure, you know, the people that have to do things
Yeah.
are there, and it's not
You heard
just
it here first.
opinion stuff.
It's all recorded.
Yeah.
So Lieutenant, thank you.
Noel, did you get this out to everybody? This is some background on the docs.
So then, Noel, if we have suggestions about this, should we should we send those directly to Noel or should we send those to Chip?
Sure, you can do one-on-ones, Noel. We have
Do we
any
have a chip
deliberation?
working group?
If we have deliberations, we need to do that as open meeting and we'll schedule that.
And if your chip is
Yeah.
doing it,
That's what I'm proposing, and I propose, I didn't say so, but I'm away for a couple of weeks, so proposing mid-October, we have probably a 2-hour session, and we'll just start defining, multiple projects.
Right.
We'll start defining stuff and try and put some structure around the process.
I'll send you my email, you can blast it to their committee.
Will do.
Does that work?
Not hearing any new business, can I entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
I,
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Sean,
Chris.
thanks for hanging in there.
Hey, thank
Thanks
you
for
guys.
being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.